I'd like to start with karakia, if that's okay. Haki roto, haki waho, kia tau te Māori e, ko kiri nei, ina piki me nā tiki, ko te rangi Māori e tātou, e rapu nei, ti hei mori mori. Breathe in, breathe out, settle the emotions that stir inside of us through the ups and the downs. It is peace that we seek. Sneeze the breath of life. So welcome to this first meeting of the Audit and Risk Committee for this triennium. I have beside me Andrew Douglas, who's the co-chair of the Audit and Risk, and just like to say hello also to Kate and Pim. G'day, how are you going? So that's good. Right. Apologies. I'm not sure of any apologies.
Alexa isn't here, is she?
No, she's sorry. Apology for lateness.
Okay, so we note that.
Just a technical issue. I think the way we left this is Gretchen, which is great to see you here, should be have ex officio after her name in order that she doesn't count as a quorum member on the attendance. If that makes sense.
You too, perhaps.
That's right. You're not.
We have a quorum.
We do. You've got
Yes,
4, 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
and yes, 4 out of 7.
Okay, no, that's good. Thanks, Kate.
Good start.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah. I'm not aware that we have a public forum, and so just a confirmation of the agenda. Is there any other items that need to go on this agenda that aren't there at the moment? Okay, that's good. We'll stick with what we've got. Are there any conflicts of interest with any of the items on the agenda? Okay, there's none. Right, well, let's start by having a look at the Audit and Risk Programme. Nick, are you going to speak to this?
Yep.
All right, in your hands.
Okay. So I mean the probably the key thing to look at is the third page of it, which has got the actual template or spreadsheet with that sort of lists out the 4 meetings that we have and what we cover. But this is fairly similar to what we've done in previous years, other than we've sort of changed it because the timing of the meetings was slightly different in the previous triennium. Now, Audit and Risk is running quarterly, runs a month after the Finance Committee, and that aligns better with particularly the September meeting when the annual report will be looked at and Deloitte, the auditors, will be here. So fairly similar topics. We try and spread them. Some things that you'll see there are green, they're covered at every single meeting, and some things are only covered annually, and then there's some others that are covered every 6 months. But really, yeah, it's open to the subcommittee to discuss and see whether that meets everybody's expectations, and if there's any changes that anybody wants, we can adjust that. But it gives obviously just outlines all 4 meetings, what will be expected to be covered at this point. That's not to say that, see, one of the things, one of the briefs is that this committee, subcommittee can look at other things that are referred to it, in particular by the Finance Committee. So other things can get added to this. It's not that that's all that this subcommittee will or can look at.
Any questions? Yeah, Andrew.
Thanks for putting this together, Nick. Looks good. Great to have the work plan sort of first up, so we'll see what's on our plate for the year in the next 3 years. Most importantly, it directly references our terms of reference, which is sort of the key part of that. Some of it's scheduled in, the audit and the annual report are very much scheduled into our diaries at certain dates during the year. You've got sort of other ones there, which are the ones in yellow, where I guess they sort of can come up as required. a bit of a reflection on last term in terms of what we want to make sure we do and progress forward this term. There's one particular point in there around internal audit. So we have a mandate under our terms of reference, one particular line in terms of making sure that the organisation has good internal controls operating within it. As part of that, we have mandate over an internal audit function. It's extremely common within local government bodies to have an internal audit function. Last term, we got sort of our risk matrix enhanced, and off the back of that, we can now look at doing some internal audits. And so that's sort of certainly front in my mind to get going with as soon as possible. So there's a bit of a process around that in terms of what we actually look at and why. So we have to plan that, but certainly that'll be sort of something that I'll need to keep going with sooner rather than later.
Okay, yep.
Thanks, thank you. Just following on from that, and I'm not quite sure if this is part of an internal review or audit or something else. One of the risks in light of at any time, but especially with Cyclone Gabrielle, is understanding our flood control systems. And I know they're under review at the moment, but do we have a role in the audit and risk of those being reported back? They'll go to the appropriate committees, but the risks with some of those things, and whether they're internal or external reviews, understanding those risks. I'm just interested, possibly for Andrew, to comment about how the appropriateness of how we do those things. And the only other one the other question I had, which I also, maybe it's directed to Andrew, is understanding we're looking at doing a rates review, which is a huge package of work. The same staff here will be doing a lot of that sort of work, I presume. But with a rates review come risks in itself of challenges. So just understanding how that process may affect audit and risk as well.
Sure. So, Chair, go for the Chair. So yeah, good question, Kate. So I guess you've raised a couple of key risks there for the organisation. And our subcommittee name is audit and risk, and you'll see in the terms of reference it talks about risk management. And so essentially this committee has oversight over all risks of the organisation, which is actually pretty wide and can be sort of all consuming. The most basic way I do explain it to people is if a risk is being dealt with at another committee level, then audit and risk notes that and just leaves it to that other committee, or if it's being dealt with by the full council. So there'll be some pretty key risks to the organisation which are completely being dealt with in other forums, and that's fine, and we just note that here. If they're not being dealt with there, we can raise them here and keep an eye on them in this forum. So that's pretty important to note. And I guess that's
Any further questions on the work program?
Yeah, probably just following on that from Andrew. Look, one risk that I'm and Kate and I have also talked about this, and we've brought it up within council, is actually understanding the full degree of risk associated with implementing programs from external funders. That would be, for instance, the Wallaby program, the Wild and Conifer program, Te Hakapupu Pleasant River program, where, for instance, at Te Hakapupu, we were given that a council resolution that simply said funding will be covered in the budget, but we've actually got no implications where that budget's coming from, where it's been reprioritised, but also what our ongoing commitments are, and whether those be commitments that are of public perception, and whether we should be actually going for more government funding and where those projects lead us. The Conifer, the Wallabies, the lakes of Te Hakapupu are quite significant chunks of money that, when government, especially when government funding runs out, where is our commitment and where is that perceived? And do we spell that out clearly enough where we're going? So somewhere in the risk matrix, somewhere I want that to be further looked at. And it may only be just no more than a reporting a way that's reported to us, but I simply see that as risks that we're jobs for nature stuff and all that.
Nick, do we have any responsibility to the funders to actually submit some kind of documentation, some audit of what's been spent and what's been achieved with that money?
To central government.
Or to any of the funders, for instance, that Kevin was talking about, lobby control conflicts and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, if you take Wildings, for example, there's quite a detailed structure there around how that funding works and the reporting that we have to do back through to MPI. Obviously, initially they actually do give us that funding up front, but all the reporting back on where it's spent and the progress, and then the actual contract agreement there is that if that money isn't spent, we have to, we have to give it back to them, unless we come to an agreement. They might roll it over into the next year. But yeah, there's a lot of reporting that goes for that. For example, I'm not familiar with the other two, exactly what it is, but generally anything that comes through central government like that will have a very detailed reporting structure behind it, either to get the money initially and or to report back on progress and how that's all spent.
So Kevin, your concern around the jobs for nature, how can we take that further?
Look, again, that's a lot of that one, and I do understand the funding regime from government on that, but it is, there's a perception, there's a growing perception out in the community that we will be continuing that funding some way or some other. And should we be doing that? Look, I'm happy either way, but it's actually creating that the right platform for either us to rate for it or for us to apply for more government money. There's a limited period, but the perception, and exactly the same with the conifers and the wallaby programs, and that was very, very clear and evident in the meetings I've just been to, that there's a public perception that the actions won't stop, but the government money, it may stop, it may not, hopefully it won't, but certainly there's going to be more and more pressure on us to continue those programs which are successful and which are going well, but I just don't believe we have enough examination of what those perceptions or those risks are.
Richard?
So a couple of things. I wonder if we're getting into risk rather than the work program discussion, but just in terms of the paper we're looking at, and also just reflecting on Andrew's comment that while this committee has an oversight of risk, if those risks are being dealt with elsewhere within the organisation, then that can be noted. And I think your ones are very valid and will be quite high on the list of priorities in terms of our discussion about how council chooses to respond through future funding decisions, because the expectation is there from those groups and the community. And the council will have to make some decisions about how it responds to either reductions or funding disappearing altogether. But that for me would be dealt with through our existing mechanisms of annual plan and then long-term plan. Whether it appears on a risk register, I think is a different discussion when we get to a paper on the risk register, as opposed to the work program. But I think that relationship between this committee and those risks being dealt with elsewhere in the business and just making sure we don't end up double handling everything through.
100%. Yeah. That's good.
Thanks, Richard.
Thanks.
Is there any further discussion on the work program? Okay, so we have a recommendation that the Audit and Risk Committee notes this report and secondly endorses the proposed work program for the 2023 calendar year.
Happy to move.
Thank you, Kevin. Second, Gretchen. Thank you, Gretchen. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? It's carried. Thank you. Okay, the corporate policy overview report. Nick, once again.
Yeah, the corporate policies. Interestingly, this one came up last triennium, and then it was requested that that this report, or more importantly, the master table that's behind it, comes back to this, to audit and risk every meeting. So we've continued with that. And I've also put there just an outline of, we have a internal policy group that meets to just go through policies and basically do that internal review function as we go through. Most of those policies are approved and signed off by the chief executive, but we go through this group and review and work through them. So there's been a few meetings of that group since the last audit and risk meeting. We've just outlined there when those meetings were and what policies have actually been through, and then the table itself with all of our policies, which are split into various areas of the business internally, but there's also internal and there's council policies as well, because there's a number of policies that council itself approves and looks after. So that list of where they're at is there, but that is it is a living document. You know, it's continually a work in progress, and we're updating in various ones of those policies, you know, as they come due, or as new ones are developed, they're going onto that list. So it's really just keeping it on this subcommittee's agenda and on your radar, that there is all of these policies. If there's anything that the subcommittee you know, wants to dive into deeper, you can, which the subcommittee did with some last triennium, or alternatively, you know, if there's anything that you're thinking there's gaps there, that there's areas where there isn't policies that there should be, that can be raised, and we can go away and have a look at that and bring it back.
Kevin?
Yeah. Just on that master sheet, Nick, there's a whole lot of new ones that are starting, which was, you know, storage. What do we transition to retirement, engagement, financial assistance, recognition of service, safe driving. So how do you actually identify these, and what sort of process? I see all those having really good merit. I just wonder what your general process is to identify those as needs.
Well, those ones have actually come up, but they've been sitting there on this list to, you know, to they're either been in creation or to be looked at for a while. They're things that as like, for example, you know, transitioning to retirement, as this, you know, is starting to come up, the area will identify that they, you know, it'd be good to have a policy so that everybody understands what our policy and how we're going to deal with these things. Some of these there, like, they haven't been actioned, and some of the other HR ones, we've had some changes in the HR team, had some vacancies, so a few of those are still on the to-do list. But the other thing, that although they might be down there, over time they might not actually end up being created as a separate policy. They might roll into an existing policy as just, you know, a new section within there. So they're really just there. As I said, this is just a good place for us to capture, so that we know all the things that are going on, and, you know, the issues that are popping up, and then we can work out, yeah, where the policies are needed, amendments to existing. So that's generally how it happens. It gets raised at that group that these are coming up, and thinking about looking at that area, and we might put it down as we're going to create a policy. Whether we do or not, that'll be determined.
Good.
Yep.
Thanks, Nate. Thank you.
Just a question on the procurement policy amended to add firearms prohibited goods. Just explain what that policy actually is, or what it requires.
So we've got a procurement policy, which we should probably call it, I think it's now called the Procurement Contracts Management Policy, because we changed that. But at this point, when we looked at that, we have in that policy about basically how we procure goods, and what we can and can't do. So it's got all of our, delegations. It goes through the policies around, getting quotes and when you tender and all of that. But it also has in there things that it does have some prohibited goods. And this was to that meeting, an amendment came because we've actually moved out of having firearms. So we don't have any firearms anymore in the
So it's
organisation.
Council ownership of firearms.
Exactly.
Right.
So what we did was we amended it to make it clear that firearms are prohibited goods, just so that nobody
From
could,
an ownership perspective.
from
only.
council ownership. Yeah. So council will not. We actually got, we disposed of all of our firearms, and this just says we're not going to go buy anymore because it's prohibited under the policy.
But it wouldn't remove the ability of, say, a staff member driving through a farm, picking up a hunter who was carrying a firearm, being able to give them a ride in a staff truck to the road. That'd be a different policy because this is procurement is buying them. That sits in our vehicle policy, and I think it is prohibited in our vehicle policy. That particular
does sit under
example.
our vehicle policy, and that would probably be classed as hitchhiking, and we don't allow staff to pick up hitchhikers.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the question is, can council vehicles carry firearms, be they other people's firearms?
Yeah.
Well,
Uh,
I don't know if we're going to
Yeah, I
discover
don't-
this now, but it's probably worth noting if you.
You've answered the question, and then I've raised another one that is different. So the question is really around procurement, which is, that's fine. Thank you. The other one I think we might need to discuss at some point.
Yeah. Could I just ask the process of review of these policies, who undertakes it? I mean, some of these policies are very operational, like the meal breaks one and all that sort of thing. But I mean, and there's obviously policies here that are at a high level, council type policies. So what is the process? I see you've got sort of review periods in this, but how do you go about it? I mean, a significant council policy as compared to a operational policy.
Yeah, so every policy has a policy owner, and then it's going to, as I said, most of them are signed off by the chief executive, but some will go, come to council. So obviously those ones that are in the council list come to council and council approves them. But the other ones, the policy owner will be the one who is responsible for reviewing it and bringing it then in the first instance to this group if they're going to make any changes or not. And then ultimately it goes to the chief executive who will sign it off, whether, even if it was just a rollover, that the review was, it got looked at, there's no changes, it's still got to be re-signed and documented because it needs a new review date.
Not a very basic question. So on the big spreadsheet, we're publicised. I was just wondering who Jostle is, what that stands for.
Intranet. So it's the.
Is that on the our own one, is it? Thank you. Is
Okay.
that her name? Their
You had
name?
your hand up.
Thank you. I've got two questions. One is I'm really interested. It's a small one. Page 9, the code of conduct policy. I'm surprised to see the purpose, and it seems to be an odd one to be under an employee listing. And it certainly wouldn't be the place that I'd go looking for that if I wanted to trespass someone out of the building. So I'm just wondering, A, is that the right purpose and the right spot, but also, is it the appropriate name?
It might be an error. I think there might be a transcription error that we haven't picked up because the code of conduct is our overarching code of conduct for staff about internal, behaviours and.
Thank you. Yeah.
Not trespass. We have a
Thank you.
trespass policy, I think.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Look, and Richard will know that I've banged on about this in another council. We've got some major challenges with climate change. And I gather you at council had a presentation again yesterday on that, as I'm sure we will at every meeting. In previous meetings, when we've inquired about the transport provisions for staff and how that may reduce the carbon footprint, and the ability for people to be given e-bikes instead of cars if that's what they wanted, has been a matter that we were advised not to touch. I'm just wondering in some of these policies whether they're consistent with a view to minimise our carbon footprint as a organisation, and should we be actually looking at some of our transport stuff in that regard?
Yeah, I'll answer that, Kate. So I do recall those conversations previously. I wouldn't describe them as banging on, but we did used to discuss it. I'm aware of that, and as part of the Wharenunaka project, we've just started to work on a travel plan, which is a requirement, and that's happening, as you know, through other large employers in Dunedin. And I am very conscious of how, as a business, we offer our staff, whether incentives is the right word, but opportunities to choose different forms of travel, but also we have to be conscious as a public entity and use of public money, so it's that balance there. But I do know what you're talking about, and I'm expecting that travel plan will throw up some options in that space, because there are examples being used in other businesses around Dunedin that I think we can pick up. And I would expect us to be introducing some of those things for our staff. That may lead to us needing to amend some other policies to make sure that they're all consistent and we don't cause issues elsewhere. But I think it's a pretty normal thing for employers to do now. So I would expect us to start introducing some of those things.
Okay. And so when these are, if I take that a step further, when these things are reviewed, it's not just saying they're not inconsistent with climate change policy or whatever, but that they actually are consistent with reducing our carbon footprint. And those are the sort of nuances I think we need to be more directive about, and whether that's possible. So when it comes to staff and councillors, or sharing cars, I know COVID's been terrible for that, but those sort of things will be reviewed potentially as well.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, Pam, where you go?
Yes, I was just going to add to Richard's answer there too. Look, I'm very keen to make sure that the organisation continues to reduce its carbon footprint. I'm on the, I think the governance group for the Zero Carbon Alliance that we've got with Dunedin City and with several other large employers actually in Dunedin. But look, I'm also quite keen on something called the EnviroMark, which I've used at a couple of other organisations, where we actually do measure quite closely what our own carbon footprint is as an organisation. We should be role modelling this, particularly as an environmental council. And Sarah Munro will tell you that I wasn't very keen to sign off a couple of new diesel trucks recently, although she twisted my arm in the end. But partly some of this is around, well, for instance, in the case of the diesel trucks, we just don't have a zero carbon option available just yet, but we will have in 2 or 3 years' time. So look, there are different ways that we can reduce our carbon footprint. Obviously, we'd be preferring to use electric cars where we can. We haven't got any at all, which I think is a bit embarrassing, but it's partly because of infrastructure around. I understand Nick explains that Stafford Street's not well set up for being able to act as a charging area, but we'll try and sort that out in the new building, I presume. So, but notwithstanding all of that, we still have managed to reduce our own carbon footprint, and Francisco has got the data on this, and you might be interested, Kate, by a significant amount over the last the short period, maybe even as much as 30%. Nick, do you remember the number?
Yeah, I think we're down to about 450, approximately 450 tonnes, but from over, we were over 600 the year before. So that's for the, well, I'm trying to remember, is it actually? Yeah, no, we're in 23. So that's for the 2022 financial year.
It's quite remarkable, actually, given this increase in staff that we've had and increase in vehicles. So we've actually done quite a good job. But look, it's something we should be role modelling. So I'm supporting you, Kate.
Okay, Gretchen.
Noting it's good to see that there's a youth engagement policy under creation, something we've grappled with for a while as the council, but wondering if it's an internal staff type policy or a wider council type of policy.
I
Everyone
think,
knows
and Amanda can add a bit to this, but we've just commenced that piece of work on an engagement strategy, and I think that will end up
right.
folding into that as part of our broader engagement strategy, and youth as a key component of that, as opposed to a standalone policy.
Yeah, and I think we're in a bit of transition across particularly the people policies. They've gone through a couple of managers. I think that it would be more of a procedure, particularly around graduate engagement and which career fairs we go to, and whether we engage with high schools and that sort of thing. Because there was a piece of work started about 18 months ago in that space. That probably doesn't accurately reflect what we were looking at there, but we'll.
This is a transition to retirement policy, so I did wonder if that might be what it was all about. Thank you.
Good. Any further questions? Okay, so the recommendation is to note this report. So we move that, please. Yes, Andrew, thank you. Second, Gretchen. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Okay, thank you. The ethical investment policy. Nick again.
Me again. Yeah. So this is it's probably more of a discussion piece. To obviously this came up in finance. So an example is something coming from finance and then coming here to for audit and risk to have a look at. And audit and risk has looked at this previously. So all I've done here is pull out some information that JB Ware, who is our investment manager, provided a few years ago on this same topic. We actually hadn't progressed that any further. A few other things, got in the way and we got distracted on them. But really put that there just to show this, it's not a new topic. It's come up before, been discussed before. Some of those slides that JB Ware had presented to a workshop with council previously, put them there so that councillors could have a look at that. And then really the idea is to get some indication of how the subcommittee would like to progress this further, because the investment policy, sits under this subcommittee. Generally looks at it as part of the managed fund, and we've got the treasury management policy and the statement of investment policy and objectives. So we can go down the track and we can make amendments to those. It's just really, from here, how does the subcommittee want us to progress that? Kate.
Two issues. First of all, I've never been quite clear why our list of investments are not public, but just for some advice, are we allowed to mention examples from that list which isn't public, or not?
Yeah, we do have a confidential agenda, Kate.
Yeah, I appreciate that. But so my question is, are we allowed to mention examples of investments we have now?
Yeah. The advice I've got is that it's a no, Kate.
Okay.
So let's leave it through to the other the confidential agenda.
Okay. My other question is, my understanding is that we need to sign off on the SIPO, or the Statement of Investment Policies and Objectives, at the next meeting. And if that's the case, then we need to progress this if we want to. And I don't know that that's something we can do, whether if there's an intention to have a different nuance in that, whether the best way forward would be to have a small working party of members of this committee and to do that. Just trying to find a way forward to do that more quickly than discussion at the table.
Yeah, I'm just agreeing with what Kate's saying. If we are going to progress, we'll need to workshop in some form. We'll just, I wouldn't think we'll be unilaterally making changes now, but we need to workshop it and get the opinions.
Except, yeah,
and governance team.
yeah, I'd agree with that. And just also that we've got JB Ware there to give us that advice in terms of what they see out there in the market, because we're certainly not the only people who are thinking in the space or taking action in it. So getting their advice. So I'm just really noting what Nick's got on the paper. You'll see his paragraphs 11, 12 and 13, where he's actually given us some options. And as I read through those, I thought they were, were sensible options there. So there is some negative screening. So there is some screening that actually already happens by our by JB Ware. So there are investments that they don't undertake already, and so we can easily have those in the SIPO. And if we wanted to expand it, then absolutely we need to go to a wider discussion and have JB Ware provide some advice as well. So
Okay. Alan.
Yes, this is discussion rather than question. That sounds right.
Yeah.
I guess as an organisation whose chief role is around environmental management, I think we should use whatever levers we have for action on climate change, and this is one of them. As an organisation that strives to be a good employer, we should not invest in industries that exploit their workers. And as an organisation that promotes the well-being of its citizens, we should look to invest in industries that support well-being as well. So I'd really like the council to move on this much further, and to do it proudly and publicly too, in order to be an example to other councils and other organisations in the country.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
There's the other issue I wanted to raise under this, and again, it's hard because I'm not allowed to name companies, but if there are companies that we do significant resource consents for that we have investments in, should we be concerned about that?
Yeah, I would think so.
yeah, I would think that absolutely needs to form part of the discussion. Yeah, in terms of how we do look at this.
Thank you. And I'll deal with that in the confidential, but the SIPO, because the SIPO will be in public, I presume, we naturally need to have that discussion in public as well. Thank you.
Yeah, and probably just shorten that discussion that we may have in our confidential part. Surely we should be just heading now to create a workshop.
Yeah.
There's all that. Yeah, there's no point discussing it in a next part and then discussing it again, Kate. And I'm absolutely agreeing with what you're trying to do and with Alan. So I'm just saying, well, do we need to recommend it, or we're just asking the CFO to create a workshop time to?
Yeah. Well, we had a recommendation here that staff would direct that we as council provide staff with a direction on how they wish to progress ethical investment. That may be,
which is simply to create a workshop.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gary.
Yeah, look, I agree with that. I think it makes sense to have the whole table involved. I think we would need JB Ware there, so that as we look to pick and choose our preferences, then they are able to give us an indication of where the portfolio sits, the returns that we get currently, the level of concern raised by each councillor versus then where that sits with each of those investments, and how big the concern is versus the investment and where the return is off that investment. So there's a real risk, I think, that we delve into some direction that actually substantially affects the returns that we get, and also then heads us off on a tangent that's possibly not where we want to be.
Yeah. That's right. Thank you.
And so just to add to that, so certainly over the last 12 months, worldwide, the ESG funds have performed some of the worst. So just because of the way that markets have been, so we need to do it with our eyes wide open, in terms of the place that we want to go for the right reasons, but also the other impact of that financially. So it's just more doing it with our eyes wide open.
We just be clear on the direction. So the direction is that Nick will arrange for a workshop with council collectively.
Yeah.
And we will have
Yeah,
JB at that as well. Yeah. Okay. Just so clear on what we're.
Okay, we'll talk about this further, no doubt. But, so the two recommendations we have, firstly, that the council notes this report, and secondly, now that Audit and Risk instruct staff to, or Nick, to organise a workshop to look at this. I'm sure you've got it there. Yeah. I'll move. Okay, thank you, Kevin. Seconder, Gary, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. It's carried, thank you. Okay, people and safety 6 monthly report. I think we've got a different presenter. So, Amanda.
Hi. Cool. So firstly, I'll introduce our People Services Lead, Kelly Stewart. So Kelly started with us in November last year, and I think most of you will be familiar with Gina Watts, who's currently our acting team lead, health and safety. And currently, just for full background, I'm the acting People and Safety Manager, but we're just in the process of confirming an appointment to that role. So the next Audit and Risk Committee, you'll have the full People and Safety team. In terms of the report, we'll take the report as read, but obviously very happy to answer any questions or pick up any points that people might want to raise.
We can have questions. Andrew's got one. Excellent.
I'll start. Thank you very much for a great report. It's really good to see all the progress that's happening and certainly a lot of activity. So that's fantastic. I see sort of up front in the executive summary, you just sort of refer to work being currently underway on a draft people and safety strategy. And so I'm just really sort of keen to hear about that piece of work in terms of, what we're doing and why and how that's sort of going to fit into things.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm happy to answer that. We have started this piece of work really with a view to, we've got the LTP coming up. So obviously the organisation is starting to do a bit of thinking around there. That in my mind also includes what we're doing in budget-wise from an internal organisational people and safety perspective. We need to have our budgets aligned with that process. So that's part of the drive for putting a strategy together now. It'll help set up our work plan for this year 3 of the current long-term plan and what we want to do going forward. So it's still at the very preliminary stages. Gina, Kelly and I have done some thinking. We've got some sort of broad outcomes that we are shaping up with sort of year 1, year 2, year 3 activities. Next steps, we need to still do some more thinking around that. We would then look to canvass that with ELT, with our management group, and then potentially broader in the organisation, but with a view, and obviously with a new manager coming on with them as well, but looking to land it, probably 4 or 5 months, so that it feeds directly into the LTP planning, but also provides that oversight at the moment.
And so, so that sounds great, and that probably just feeds into my thinking when I was reading this. I was sort of thinking to myself, looks like we're doing a lot of good activity. I was sort of wondering, what the plan was, and then are we achieving our plan in terms of the health and safety space? So I guess so when that does sort of come through, it would be good to see sort of something in the report to show us that, so we can sort of monitor how we're going against our plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think at the moment the team are working off the kind of tail end of the previous strategy, which was done probably three years ago now, and probably wasn't socialised as widely with the whole organisation. It was more of an internal strategy and plan for the team. So what we're really wanting for this strategy is it to be not external facing in terms of the public, but in terms of, so the whole organisation knows where we're heading with the stuff, what the priorities are, what the emerging priorities are, and how we resource those and put those in place.
Great. Sounds great.
Kate.
Thank you for this. I can't recall, and I haven't gone back and checked, but I'm interested in the way we're reporting this. The number of incidents that you've given us, and in other organisations I've been involved in, we've had them comparative ones with other years to see how we're trending. And these ones aren't. And maybe it's just because it's a quarterly report, but I'm just wondering what I can't tell from this report, if we're getting worse, more accidents or less, or fewer. Sorry, I think fewer is a better word there. Yeah, what the trend is. So I can't tell if I should be getting alarmed or not.
Yep, thanks, Kate. So last year we implemented our online safety management system. And so part of that project was bringing in some of the previous reporting. So in terms of what you're seeing in the overview report, you're seeing the last year of data and basically from the point where the system was implemented.
Yeah.
The reason that the previous data isn't showing in there is that it's kind of aligned a little bit differently in terms of the categories that it's set to.
Yep.
But certainly from the next quarter on, so the next report that you see, you'll have that ongoing comparison. But I can tell you from comparison between the years, the number of incidents pretty on track. Some we're seeing a reduction in, so violence and aggression, for instance, where others are pretty stable.
Thank you. And that's our job. This is one of the most important reports we get. And I suppose that there's just that confidence because you didn't speak to the report. I didn't know that. And I just want to tease that out. So thank you very much for that response.
Yeah, and if I could just add as well, I think for us, we wouldn't be concerned as well if we were seeing incidents. I mean, obviously we'd be concerned if serious incidents were going up, but we really want staff to be reporting, whether it's near misses, whether it's incidents, because that reporting culture means we've got staff who are really focused on health and safety and we know what's happening across the organisation. So yeah, the numbers are not something that we'd ever be saying, oh, we need to get them down as much as possible.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, probably just could I add to that? And I'm very comfortable with the way you've reported, but in reality, if we are changing any systems within the organisation, a key part is actually seeing the trends. So if we, and this is probably just not on the health and safety, this is a general one, that if we're going to implement new technologies, we actually need to track how we've been going. And so snapshots of 1 or 2 years is probably not enough for an organisation. So it's whatever technology we bring forward and whatever changes we do, we need to be able to look back to ensure that we are tracking the right direction and learn from the past. So, but no, I'll be happy with the report. Then if there's no other questions, I've got to keep. Yeah, Kate.
You've got another question, Kate? We've got Pim.
Oh yeah, look, I was just going to add the same thing. I think we just recently had a meeting on this and it was exactly my issue as well. I have to say that the trend data is useful. It's true that the pandemic has impacted a little bit on some of the data we've collected around, incidents and the like around staff not always being at work, and there've been some issues related to that. And I think Amanda's also and Gina have just given you an answer in terms of the data collection and the process we're going through. But the trend data is extremely important. The second question I had, Amanda, is around ensuring that the officers under the Act, who are actually the council members and the chief executive, fully understand their responsibility under the PCB as a PCBU, and whether we've given, especially our new council members, sufficient training in terms of their responsibilities. Because I'm with Kate on this, health and safety is a really important aspect, both in terms of embedding a health and safety culture within the organisation, but also ensuring that we all understand our responsibilities.
Yeah, thanks, Pim. So we actually just were emailing the co-chairs a couple of days ago. Gina had said that it would be good to offer this group and potentially all councillors, if everybody wanted to be part of, a briefing exactly on that point on duties under the Act, and also how ORC as a framework presents its health and safety and manages that, because yeah, starting at the basics. So we're very happy to put that in the diary and we'll work on that.
Yep, great, thanks, Amanda. I mean, I have to say, I think we have been a bit sloppy, given that I've been in this job for almost 10 months, and I don't think I've had that briefing. So, I think we all need to make sure that we do take this stuff seriously in terms of our responsibilities, because we also know that we can't insure ourselves against that responsibility any longer, and particularly the chief executive is at risk, actually, in local government.
So we'll have that as an action item. So we just check, we're keeping action items out of the meeting as opposed to resolutions?
No,
No,
but you can add it as a resolution and I can track it, or we can change the process.
I don't mind it either way,
Okay.
just to
Let's
make
just
sure
add
we
it as a
do
resolution for you.
resolution to hold it.
Sorry, I don't mean to sound too critical either, not least of all because we have really struggled with our team, and we've had a lot of vacancies, and we're just finally getting back into sort of the recruitment place we need to be, I think, Amanda. So the new manager will make a big difference too.
Kevin?
Yeah, look, I am actually really, that was one of the points I was going to bring up, and especially around contractor events. So again, the report's really good and really clear and concise, but that's, I really want a great understanding where we are liable around our contractors. We see the Wilding Pine pick up, we see the bus one, and there's two parts to that. Is really, I want to know where we're liable, but also, especially with the buses, we seem to be getting a lot of reputational damage around buses when perhaps some of that should be going somewhere else, i.e. to the contractors. So I think that workshop would be pretty jolly good. So around the table we get to understand it, but then we can dig a bit deeper how we want some of those things managed. So
It's true.
So do you want a resolution to that, or do you type one? Speak up.
I have typed something up. Let me show you, see if that's good enough.
Does it cover it, Kevin?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
all right. I'm happy to move that.
Yeah, shall we just take that at the end of this discussion, shall we?
Yeah. One of that's, because we've got the notes report. Yeah, let's go. Thank you. I do have
Another question?
Yeah. Right, so under item 5, employee wellbeing, just page 28 of my report. So you've done your annual wellbeing survey for 2022, and you've increased your up to 36%. So why is only 36% of the people taking part in that?
Responding, yeah. So some of what we think the respondent rate is due to the time of year that the survey goes out. So it's like end of the year, November, December, which is where people can be a bit more tired of surveys at that point. So kind of part to that that we're looking at is introducing it to match the financial year. So moving it to mid-year, which we hope would increase that survey response. But also what we find when people are responding to the survey, it's when they've got something that they really want to say, where other people think, no, I'm happy, everything's kind of going well in this space. So yeah, we don't really see as much a reflection on that side.
Understand, yeah. So you change your timing. If I was to suggest a time, it would be more September, October, because also end of year is a busy time for a lot of groups as well. So I mean, so end of financial year is busy. Next team's probably reasonably busy at that stage. Well, he tells us he's always busy at that stage, and I'm sure he is. And then if your Christmas period's also busy, just an organisation of 600 that I was part of, we were always in that September, October period when it was more a business as usual, normal business pressures. So it is sad that we're only getting that 36% because it's.
Sorry, if I could just
absolutely.
to clarify as well. So that's just the respondents to the survey on how the wellbeing activities have gone. It's not participation in the overall wellbeing activities. And I think in terms of the other kind of surveys we do throughout the organisation, we'd never get 100% of staff responding to a wellbeing survey. So I think that gives us a good guide generally of what people feel about it.
I think, my reflection is that there's no perfect time of year because there's always, everyone's always busy for different reasons. And we've also got to think about what else we're looking to engage with staff on during the year, so we don't overwhelm them in a particular part of the year. But it would be good to drive some more input through the wellbeing space, given the focus we put on it, and some of that's on ELT and their managers to really, make it a priority for staff to take that few minutes out of their day and provide some feedback. So, that's just something we can take on board and once we do decide how we will run that this year, alongside other staff satisfaction, other things, then just make sure we push it and encourage staff to take part in it, because ultimately that's the feedback that will drive what we include in that wellbeing program.
And look, it'd be actually really good for people to just say, yes, actually, we're really happy, if you know what I mean. So
verify we're doing well.
And non-reply either way. We just need to, so no, very, very happy with the concept. Just have one more, sorry to take a weird one here. On page 3, it's probably you, Richard, and Pim, is we've got a list of, page 30, where we've got a list of roles that we're still tracking, or we're still trying to fill to get up to our total number. And I just wonder, which of those roles have been absolutely identified as crucial, and which have identified that we could would form part of a review that may not be as crucial. So
I can answer this. But my take on that is any time we have a resignation or a vacancy, we should be looking at it as an organisation as, what is our priority in terms of filling that role, and is that role necessary, rather than just someone's left, so we fill it. So all of those roles, my expectation is that managers and ELT will be going through that process and saying, well, is this a role we absolutely need to fill? I can't answer in terms of those ones that are currently vacant, what percentage are in each, but certainly can give you an assurance that question, particularly given the feedback we've had from council around efficiency and ensuring we're doing the right thing. Those sort of questions would be just part of that process before we go out and advertise.
Richard and I were actually discussing this just yesterday. So I completely agree with what Richard just said, because we actually discussed it yesterday. And in other organisations I've been in, where we've not always been in this growth phase, when somebody leaves, we might consider whether we want to replace that position or another one. So look, I agree with what Richard just said, but we shouldn't forget that we have been in a growth phase, that we have been trying to get to 330 FTEs. That I think since October or something, we've gone from 60 FTE vacancies to only 30 now. So these numbers are slightly out of date. So my view is we're only about 30 FTEs away from being at a full complement of staff now. So, there's different aspects to this, but there's probably a good opportunity for Richard to have a look at the vacancies and ensure that they're still the jobs that we're wanting to fill. But by and large, in my time here, I've been really focused on just getting the staffing numbers up so that to the level that we've been trying to achieve over the last 3 years, and without carrying so many vacancies, so that we can get our jobs done.
Awesome. Thanks very much for the process. Good. Much appreciated.
So, I just have one question in regard to our critical risks to health and safety. What would be the top 5, or if you've got them off the top of your head, what are the top 5 risks for health and safety that our staff face? And what are the mitigations around that?
So off the top of my head, our top ones would be vehicle operation, which includes fleet vehicles, but then also any other kind of vessels. Working around water, another one. So vessel as well, but then also the activities that our staff actually operate around and in water. Contractor safety is another one. Mental health. I'm trying to think what the other number 5 would be off the top of my head, but those would definitely be the key kind of for at the moment. They do obviously change. Sorry, last one I put in is occupational violence and aggression is the 5th one. So there's a whole different suite of control activities that we would do within that. So linking back to that conversation earlier around identification of what needs a policy or procedure. So when we're identifying those critical risks, we kind of line out the suite of current controls, but then what else is required, which will kind of lay out a work program under that.
So in terms of the risks related to travelling, driving, what sort of processes have you got around managing that?
Yep. So we have the vehicle policy that was released last year. So that encompasses the safe driving kind of components, but also just the general fleet side. We also have the vehicle, we call it Smart Track, which is the vehicle tracking
GPS.
kind of GPS software. Within each vehicle, we also have the EPID, which can be used in an emergency situation. Also within the vehicles, they've got a crash detector, which sends out alerts as well. And then in addition to that, we have a training program that goes together. So depending under what environment the vehicle is being operated, so off-road, there's full driving, for instance. For staff that are completing really regular travel, there's defensive driver training, so regular kind of regional travel. And we consistently kind of look at it to identify any gaps, which is where kind of mentions back to the vehicle operation under the improvement part in here.
Oh, that's good. And in that travel policy, vehicle policy, are we 5-star safety rating in all our vehicles? Is that one thing that we have as well, or is that specified in the document?
I don't know if it's in the vehicle policy, quite possibly, but it's part of our, it is in there because we've got vehicle procurement in there. I was thinking it might have been in procurement policy, but it's, vehicle procurement is part of the vehicle policy, and we stipulate that, 5-star safety rating. There's a whole raft of things that we tick before we'll even consider a vehicle. Yeah.
If I could just add as well, so one of the ways we also look at our critical risks is doing deep dives with ELT on what we're doing in that space. And Gina's actually just prepping to bring a deep dive on vehicle operation to ELT, so that we can go through all of the things we're currently doing and what additional controls we might need to bring in. And so that would come into the ELT table probably in the next month or so.
We do also make sure that our vehicles and plant are mechanically sound. So they go through a safety check every 3 months and an in-depth one every 6 months, just because they are being used quite frequently to make sure that they are up to the safety standard and nothing has been damaged or would potentially be a hazard for staff.
Yeah. And we've also got a really active health and safety committee. So we've got health and safety representatives from across the business. And in fact, at the last meeting a couple of weeks ago, there was an issue identified around vehicles. So that came up through the reps to the committee, and we'll now go back out to the group to listen to those worker suggestions for improvements. So it's a top-down, we've got the team managing it, but also a bottom-up approach, and move across all of those.
Lloyd?
I'd just like to add to it. I think that's really good. The report's good. It covers a lot of ground. But as Tim's saying, I'm really interested in the health and safety stuff that's serious, that's going to put us in the limelight or as life-threatening, et cetera, not too worried about paper cuts and stuff. But I want to know what the risks are, and you mentioned the 5, and what we're doing to mitigate it, and what the outcome of mitigations is, the top 4 or 5.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Because as a governor, they're the ones that I'm going to get asked about. And I'll be able to say, sure, the guy got crushed under a lot, but this is what, you've been through this training and done this and the next thing.
And we're certainly welcoming feedback on this report, because it was a new style of reporting, and so that feedback's really helpful. We'll go away and think about that.
It would be really helpful if you could have that included in the report. Something used to in a forestry company, as you can expect. We do need to know what our key risks are.
Yeah, that's the key point. We want to know what our key risks are and elaborate on them.
Okay. Any further discussion around?
Not too much.
Okay, Gary.
Do we have a problem with our ORC workshops that we need an initiative to stay mentally well through them?
Sorry, what page are you on there?
Page 28.
Press up.
And one of the 5 initiatives was staying mentally well at ORC workshops.
The workshop's about staying.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's just what I'm thinking.
I was thinking.
Yeah, I can see where you've got to.
Yeah, I've only been to a few, but I can just sharing councillors could help that.
Whenever we call it unwell ones.
Yes.
I think it relates directly to workshops with councillors, actually, for staff.
Yes, yeah, yes.
I have a few mental issues myself after most of them.
Well, thanks for that confession, Tim. You won't know. Okay, is there any further discussion on this report? No, well, thank you very much. It's very good. We do need to just do the notes, note the report and the recommendations. So we've
And can
got,
I confirm that that recommendation for the workshop, is that under the aegis of audit and risk, or is that for all council?
it was.
Yeah, well, I guess it was specifically for audit and risk because we've got the
Okay.
mandate, but I guess
But I think
wider
all
council
council-
can, anyone can
All
attend.
councillors need to be aware of the responsibilities that can be used.
Yeah, I'd so move.
Should we just get that up? And Kate, have you got something? Oh, yeah, I
Happy to
think-
second.
Oh, good, okay. Yep. Let's just bring those recommendations up. Okay, so happy to move 1 and 2.
Yep.
And Kate to second those, so yeah, and just an action that came out of that was just to get those critical risks in the report quarterly. So, okay, so we put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? That's carried.
Who was the seconder on that? I apologize.
That was Kate.
Thank you.
Okay, what are we up to? We're done.
Resolution to exclude
Okay,
public.
we do need to do that resolution.
Not recently.
Oh, no, just was there, let's leave it.
As an example, kind of.
Yeah, I just was thinking about this. Well, your stuff's good. I think perfectly use it.
Okay, so we have a resolution here to exclude the public. We will be talking about our managed fund, the strategic risk register review and the audit management letter. And they fit within the requirements for going into non-public. So I'd like to move that we enter a confidential or non-public meeting. Is that how we do it? Okay.
Second.
Thank you, Andrew. Seconded. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? That's carried. Thank you.